fantasy whispers stories. Tonight's journey takes us to ancient Sparta during the classical period, roughly 5th, 4th century BCE. Prepare to experience the harsh realities of daily life in one of history's most disciplined societies. Dawn breaks in Laconia, awakens suddenly to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance. For a moment, you're disoriented. This isn't your comfortable bed with its memory foam mattress and Egyptian cotton sheets. Instead, you find yourself on a hard, narrow wooden pallet raised slightly off the dirt floor. A thin, rough woolen blanket offers minimal protection against the morning chill that seeps through the stone walls of your modest dwelling. Welcome to Sparta, circa 425 BCE. Your small home, more accurately described as a hut, is constructed of unworked stone, mud brick, and timber. The thatched roof above shows several spots where the morning light filters through, places you'll need to repair before the autumn rains arrive. Unlike the grand architecture often associated with ancient Greece, Spartan homes are deliberately austere. The Spartan lawgiver Lycurgus forbade the use of any tools more sophisticated than an axe and saw for home construction. No ornate columns or decorative elements. Here, just practical, rudimentary shelter that reflects the Spartan ethos of simplicity and hardiness. Air inside your one-room dwelling is stale and smoky from last night's cooking fire, which has now died down to a few glowing embers in the simple hearth at the center of the room. There are no chimneys in Spartan homes. Smoke escapes through a hole in the roof or simply permeates the dwelling. Your eyes sting slightly as you stir the embers and add small twigs to revive the fire for the morning meal. Notice that your throat is parched. Reaching for the clay water jug kept near your sleeping pallet, you take a cautious sip. The water tastes slightly metallic and has tiny particles floating in it, collected yesterday from the Eurotas River that flows through the valley. There's no indoor plumbing here, no purified water on demand. This silty water is what sustains all life in Sparta. Morning rituals. As a Spartan citizen aspartiate, your day begins well before the sun fully rises. There's no lingering in bed here. Such indulgence would be seen as weakness, a quality despised in Spartan society. You quickly don your simple clothing, a chiton, which is essentially a rectangular piece of rough wool fabric folded and pinned at the shoulders. In colder months, you might add a hamadien, a larger cloak draped over the body. Sparta's clothing is notoriously plain, typically undyed and unembellished, while other Greek cities embrace vibrant colors and patterns. Spartans pride themselves on their distinctive austerity. You don't need to spend time deciding what to wear. All Spartan men wear virtually identical clothing, and the law forbids any displays of luxury or excess. You own exactly 2 garments, one to wear and one to wash. No closet full of options here. There are no mirrors in your home, but you don't need one. Spartan men wear their hair long, a tradition that sets them apart from other Greeks, who typically wear their hair short after adolescence. You quickly run your fingers through your hair to remove the worst tangles. Personal appearance beyond cleanliness is given little attention. Vanity is considered unmanly. First task is to perform a cold water washing at the communal fountain at the end of your street. Sparta lacks the sophisticated aqueduct systems found in later Roman settlements. The channels divert water from mountain springs and the Eurotas River to public fountains throughout the settlement. You grab your small oil flask and strigil, a curved scraping tool, and make your way outside. Morning air is crisp and cool in the foothills of Mount Taygetus, which looms dramatically over the Laconian plain. Sparta isn't a city in the conventional sense. It's more a collection of 5 villages, obi, spread across an open area without defensive walls. Unlike Athens or Corinth, there are no grand temples or imposing structures visible from your doorstep. Spartan settlements are intentionally unfortified. Their defense comes not from stone walls, but from the spears and shields of Spartan warriors. At the fountain, you join several other men preparing for the day. The cold water is bracing as you splash it over your face and upper body. Soap doesn't exist yet in this time period. Instead, you pour olive oil from your small flask onto your skin, then use the strigil to scrape away dirt, oil, and dead skin. This method of cleaning, known as oil cleansing, is surprisingly effective, though it leaves your skin slightly tacky to the touch. The used oil, now mixed with the grime from your body, runs down a small channel in the stone and away from the clean water source. Men around you speak little as they perform their ablutions. Spartans are famously laconic, a term derived from Laconia, the region where Sparta is located. Speech is sparse, direct, and often cutting. Flowery language and long-winded explanations are scorned. You've learned to communicate with few words, making each one count. The morning meal. Turning to your dwelling, you prepare a simple breakfast. Your daily diet bears little resemblance to the varied meals you're accustomed to in the modern world. The cornerstone of your nutrition is a dish called maza, a porridge made from barley meal mixed with water, sometimes flavored with a little olive oil, or occasionally honey if it's available. You prepare this over your rekindled fire in a simple clay pot. As you stir the thickening mixture, you reflect on how Spartan cuisine is renowned throughout Greece for its awfulness. The black broth, melas somos, a staple of Spartan communal meals made from boiled pig's blood, salt, and vinegar, is particularly notorious. A visitor from Sybaris, a city known for its luxury, once remarked after tasting Spartan cuisine, "Now I understand why Spartans have no fear of death." Morning meal is accompanied by a cup of watered wine. Drinking undiluted wine is considered barbaric throughout Greece. The wine is sour and slightly resinous, preserved with pine resin, which gives it a distinctive, turpentine-like flavor that would be jarring to modern palates. There's no coffee or tea to help you wake up, just this rough wine that provides some calories and makes the questionable water safer to drink by killing some pathogens. Fresh fruit is a rarity in your diet, though occasionally you might have dried figs or olives to supplement your meals. Vegetables are seasonal and limited, mostly onions, garlic, and whatever wild greens can be foraged from the surrounding countryside. Meat is a luxury reserved primarily for religious festivals, and the communal messes where Spartan men dine together each evening. Syssitia, communal living. For your meager breakfast, you gather what you need for your main meal later today at the Syssitia, the mandatory communal dining mess that all Spartan men belong to from age 20 until old age. Each month, you're required to contribute a specific quota of ingredients, approximately 70 kg of barley, 12 kg of cheese, 6 kg of figs, and a modest amount of wine, along with about 10 Aeginetan obels for purchasing meat. These contributions are no small matter. Failure to provide your share means expulsion from the Syssitia, and consequently, the loss of your citizen rights. This is one way that poorer Spartans occasionally fall from full citizenship into the ranks of the inferiors, hypomaeans, citizens who have lost some or all of their privileges. Today, you've managed to gather your portion, a small sack of barley from your kleros, the land allotment farmed for you by helots, some cheese, and a small skin of wine. It's not an impressive contribution, but it meets the minimum requirement. As you prepare to leave your home for the day's activities, you check your simple weapons hanging on the wall. Every Spartan citizen is, first and foremost, a soldier. Your spear, shield, sword, and bronze helmet represent not just your means of defense, about your identity as a Spartiate. The shield aspes is particularly sacred. To lose it in battle is the ultimate disgrace. As the famous Spartan saying goes, come back with your shield, or on it. Helots, Sparta's underclass. Before heading out, you stop by the small plot behind your dwelling, where two helots, stay-toned serfs, are already at work tending the garden and preparing to head to your more substantial fields outside the settlement. These helots belong to the state, not to you personally, though they're assigned to work your land allotment. Man and woman avoid direct eye contact as you approach. They are descendants of the conquered Messenians, a population subjugated by Sparta generations ago. Now, they form the backbone of Spartan agriculture, performing all the manual labor that allows you and other Spartiates to focus exclusively on military training. Their appearance is markedly different from yours. They wear even simpler clothing, rough tunics made from undyed, coarse material. By law, they must wear dogskin caps and clothing made of animal hides to mark their status. And they're required to receive a set number of beatings annually, regardless of any wrongdoing, simply to remind them of their servitude. Relationship between Spartans and Helots is one of constant tension. Helots outnumber Spartiates by a ratio of about 7-1, creating a perpetual fear of rebellion that shapes much of Spartan society and its military focus. Each year, the ephors, Sparta's elected officials, formally declare war on the Helots, allowing any Spartiate to kill them without legal consequences if they show signs of rebellion or unusual physical strength. This morning, you notice the male Helot has a fresh welt across his shoulder, probably from an encounter with the Cryptea, a secret police force of young Spartans who roam the countryside at night, authorized to kill any Helots found traveling on roads after dark, or any who seem particularly strong or defiant. Give brief instructions about the field work needed today. The Helots listen silently, eyes downcast. Their Messenian dialect differs from your Doric Greek, but generations of servitude have made them fluent in their master's language. As you turn to leave, you hear them resume working, now speaking quietly to each other in their native tongue. Education and training. As you walk through the village toward the training grounds, you pass young boys being led to their training areas. Spartan education, the agode, is unlike anything in the modern world, or even elsewhere in ancient Greece. From age 7, boys are removed from their homes and organized into herds agela, under the supervision of older youths and a state official called the paedonomos. Observe a group of 12-year-old boys, barefoot despite the morning chill, dressed in a single garment regardless of the season. Their heads are shaved, and they sleep on reed mats in communal barracks. Their education focuses almost exclusively on physical conditioning, military training, and the development of survival skills. Literacy is taught only at a basic level, enough to read military orders and laws, but not to appreciate literature or philosophy as Athenian children might. As you watch, an instructor orders the boys to strip naked and plunge into the cold waters of the Eurotas River. Several emerge gasping, but dare not complain. One boy, perhaps 10 years old, slips on the muddy bank and cuts his leg on a sharp rock. Blood runs down his calf, but he makes no sound, knowing that any display of pain would bring punishment and shame. Remember your own training, the deliberate undernourishment to encourage stealth and theft for survival. The brutal contests where young boys fought each other bloody to establish hierarchy. The regular whipping competitions at the altar of Artemis Orthia, where boys would be flogged sometimes to death while showing no pain. This extreme training system has created the most formidable infantry force in Greece, but at tremendous human cost. The training grounds, arrive at the training grounds, a large, dusty field where Spartan men engage in daily military exercises. Unlike other Greeks who might pursue arts, crafts, or commerce, your entire life as a Spartiate is dedicated to maintaining peak military readiness. Until age 30, this is your full-time occupation. After 30, you're permitted to establish a household, but you still spend most daylight hours in training and still sleep in the barracks many nights. Day's exercises begin with running. Spartans are known throughout Greece for their exceptional endurance. The morning air is cool, but you quickly warm up as you complete several circuits of the training field alongside your peers. Next comes wrestling on the hard-packed earth. There are no soft training mats here. Falls are painful, the ground unforgiving. Injuries are common, but rarely acknowledged. Wrestling is followed by weapon drills with weighted practice spears and shields heavier than those used in actual combat. The theory is simple. Training with heavier equipment makes real weapons feel lighter and easier to manage during battle. Your arms burn with fatigue as you repeat the same movements dozens of times, perfecting the coordinated shield wall maneuvers that make the Spartan phalanx nearly impenetrable. Between exercises, an older warrior, a veteran of the Persian Wars, demonstrates a particular spear technique. His body bears numerous scars, including a massive disfigurement across his back, where a Persian blade nearly ended his life at Plataea. Such scars are badges of honor in Spartan society, provided there on the front of the body. Wounds to the back, suggesting retreat, bring lifelong shame. Midday break. After several hours of intensive training, there's a brief respite. You walk to a nearby spring to drink and splash water on your face. There are no towels. You simply shake off excess water and let the midday sun dry your skin. During this break, you notice a disturbance near the edge of the training grounds. 2 Periok, literally dwellers around, free inhabitants of Laconia, who are neither slaves nor full citizens, have arrived selling small items from neighboring regions. These Periok occupy a middle status in Spartan society, handling the trade and craft production that Spartiates are forbidden to engage in. Observe as they display pottery, iron tools, and leather goods to interested buyers. As a full Spartiate, you're prohibited from engaging in commerce or any profession besides warfare. Your livelihood comes entirely from your land allotment, worked by helots. This system, unique in the ancient world, was designed to free citizens from economic concerns, so they could focus exclusively on military excellence. However, this system has created growing economic inequality among Spartiates. Some land allotments are more productive than others, and over generations, through marriages and inheritances, land has become concentrated in fewer hands. Many Spartiates struggle to meet their required contributions to their syssitia, putting their citizenship at risk. Notice one of your messmates speaking quietly with a Periokos merchant, exchanging what appears to be a small bronze figurine, perhaps a family heirloom, for several drachmas. Such transactions, while technically forbidden for Spartiates, have become increasingly common as economic pressures mount. You pretend not to notice. Exposing him would gain you nothing but an enemy. The gymnasium. The afternoon brings more specialized training at the gymnasium, a training facility dedicated to physical exercise. Unlike the elaborate gymnasiums of Athens, Sparta's facilities are utilitarian and focused purely on military preparedness rather than intellectual or aesthetic development. Here, you engage in more formalized athletic competitions, javelin throwing, discus, wrestling, and the particularly brutal pankration, a virtually no-rules combination of boxing and wrestling, where only biting and eye gouging are prohibited. Many of these activities are conducted in the nude, Gymnos means naked in Greek, giving the gymnasium its name, as is common throughout Greece. During these exercises, you notice a group of young women training in an adjacent field, running, wrestling, and throwing javelins. This is another aspect of Spartan life that shocks visitors from other Greek cities. While Athenian women are largely confined to domestic spaces, Spartan girls undergo their own physical training program, designed to produce strong mothers capable of bearing healthy warriors. These young women wear short chitons that expose their thighs during exercise, scandalous by the standards of other Greek cities, where respectable women remain fully covered in public. Spartan women enjoy significantly more freedom than their counterparts elsewhere, managing households and property, while their husbands remain in military barracks until age 30. They're known throughout Greece for their outspokenness and physical prowess. A particularly skilled female javelin thrower catches your eye. Her arm is muscular, her movements precise. She notices your glance and meets your gaze directly, something an Athenian woman would never do. There's no coyness in her expression, just the confidence that comes from being raised in a society that values female strength and capability. The curious case of King Cleomenes. As the afternoon training continues, an older warrior begins recounting the strange tale of King Cleomenes I, who ruled Sparta from around 524, 90 BCE. His story is told as a warning about the dangers of departing from Spartan traditions. Cleomenes was known for his military brilliance, but also for his erratic behavior. He successfully manipulated Athenian politics to Sparta's advantage and led campaigns against Argos that significantly weakened Sparta's traditional rival. However, his methods were often questionable by Spartan standards. The old warrior tells how Cleomenes allegedly bribed the Delphic oracle to declare his co-king Demaratus illegitimate, forcing him into exile. When this corruption was discovered, Cleomenes himself fled Sparta, first to Thessaly, and then to Arcadia, where he began inciting anti-Spartan sentiment among the local populations. Eventually permitted to return to Sparta, Cleomenes' behavior became increasingly disturbed. He took to striking citizens in the face with his staff, a bizarre and inappropriate action for anyone, let alone a king. Finally, his family had him restrained, bound in stocks to prevent further erratic behavior. While confined, Cleomenes somehow convinced a helot guard to give him a knife. In a final act of madness, he began mutilating himself, slicing his flesh from his legs upward, cutting strips from his body until he reached his abdomen, ultimately causing his own death through this gruesome self-destruction. The Spartans attributed his madness to divine punishment for his corruption and departures from traditional behavior. Some claimed it resulted from his habit of drinking undiluted wine in the Scythian fashion, a practice considered barbaric by Greeks, who always diluted their wine with water. As the old warrior finishes this macabre tale, you notice the sun beginning to lower in the sky. Soon, it will be time for the day's main meal at your syzygia, the communal dining that forms the center of Spartan social life. But before that, there's one more important duty to attend to. Evening approaches. As training concludes for the day, you return briefly to your dwelling to check on the helots and gather the food contributions for tonight's communal meal. The female helot has prepared your barley portion and collected the cheese you'll bring to the syzygia. She works silently, her hands calloused from years of labor. Notice her young son, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, hiding behind her skirts, watching you warily. Helot children know from an early age to fear Spartiates. This child will almost certainly spend his entire life in servitude, just as his parents and grandparents have done. The thought briefly crosses your mind that this child could one day be your killer in a helot revolt, a perpetual fear that shapes so much of Spartan policy and culture. Pushing the thought aside, you gather your contributions and prepare to head to the evening meal. As you exit your dwelling, you look back at the humble structure. Despite being a full citizen of what many consider Greece's most powerful city-state, your home would shock visitors from Athens or Corinth with its simplicity and lack of comfort. There are no decorative elements, no painted walls or mosaic floors, no carved furniture or delicate pottery, just the bare necessities of shelter. This austerity extends throughout Spartan life in diet, in dress, in speech, and in living conditions. The famous Spartan lifestyle that would later become a byword for discipline. And simplicity is not an exaggeration, but a daily reality shaped by the unique demands of maintaining a warrior society, perpetually on guard against both external enemies and the internal threat of helot rebellion. As the sun begins to set over Mount Taygetus, casting long shadows across the Laconian plain, you make your way toward the Syssitia building, where your messmates are gathering. The evening meal and the distinctive social dynamics of Spartan communal dining awaits. The Syssitia evening meal. Last rays of sunlight stretch across the Laconian valley as you approach the modest building where your Syssitia gathers each evening. Unlike the elaborate symposia of Athens, with their cushioned couches, entertainment, and decorative surroundings, the Spartan communal dining halls are austere structures with simple wooden benches and tables. There are no decorations on the walls, no comfort items to ease the hardness of the seating. Enter the building, nodding briefly to the other men already assembled. There are 15 members in your particular mess group, a typical size for these mandatory dining clubs that form the cornerstone of Spartan male social life. Each member is a Spartiate of varying age, from young men barely out of the agoge to veterans with decades of military service. These men are your closest companions, the brothers with whom you've trained, fought, and will potentially die alongside on the battlefield. Take your assigned place on a wooden bench. Seating in the Syssitia follows a strict hierarchy based on age and proven merit. The most honored positions are reserved for the eldest members who have distinguished themselves in battle or who hold political offices. As a Spartiate in your prime, but not yet of significant rank, you sit in the middle section, neither prominently placed nor relegated to the lowest positions occupied by the youngest members. Helot servant moves silently between the tables, collecting the food contributions from each member. You hand over your sack of barley, cheese, and wineskin. These ingredients will be combined with those from other members to create the evening meal shared by all. The quantities are carefully watched. Failure to contribute your fair share would result in your expulsion from the mess and the loss of your citizenship rights. The black broth. First course arrives, the infamous black broth, melasomos. A soup made primarily from boiled pig's blood, salt, and vinegar. Its appearance is as unappetizing as its taste, a dark, murky liquid with a metallic, sour flavor that would nauseate most visitors from other Greek cities. Yet for Spartans, this broth represents their cultural identity, austere, functional, devoid of pleasure for pleasure's sake. Receive your portion in a simple wooden bowl. There are no individual plates or serving utensils here. Each man eats directly from his own bowl using fingers, a knife, or occasionally a piece of bread to sop up liquid. Metal spoons exist in this time period, but are considered an unnecessary luxury for warriors who should be able to endure minor discomforts. As you consume the unpalatable mixture, you recall the famous story of the visiting dignitary from Sybaris, who, upon tasting the black broth, remarked to the Spartan king, "Now I understand why why Spartans have no fear of death. The king replied simply, "We value courage, not cuisine." Main dish follows, a pottage of barley, vegetables, and small portions of meat. Meat is a relative rarity in the ancient Greek diet, consumed much less frequently than in modern Western societies. When available, it typically comes from sacrificial animals following religious ceremonies. Today's portion appears to be goat, tough and gamey, but providing valuable protein for bodies constantly pushed to physical limits. Food portions are deliberately modest by design. Spartans believe that overeating leads to laziness and weakness. Hunger is seen as a virtue, keeping warriors alert and accustomed to deprivation they might face on military campaigns. Obesity among Spartans is virtually non-existent. In fact, citizens are regularly inspected for physical fitness, and those found overweight can be publicly reprimanded or even punished. Wine and conversation. As the meal progresses, watered wine is served in simple clay cups. Unlike the elaborate drinking parties of Athens, where wine flows freely and philosophical discussions extend into the night, Spartan wine consumption is strictly controlled. Young men are sometimes forced to observe helots who have been deliberately intoxicated, their stumbling and foolish behavior presented as an object lesson in the dangers of drunkenness. Conversation during the meal is sparse and direct. Spartans are famously laconic, their speech as economical as their lifestyle. Long-winded explanations or flowery language would earn immediate mockery. When men do speak, it's typically about military matters, hunting exploits, or brief political discussions. Senior member of your Sicily, a veteran warrior named Aristodmus, who fought at the Battle of Plataea against the Persians, poses a question to a young man who has recently completed his agoge training. What makes a good soldier? The young man considers carefully before answering, knowing his response will be judged harshly if found wanting. Obedience, courage, and love of Sparta, he finally replies. Aristodmus nods slightly, the barest acknowledgement that the answer was acceptable. In Spartan society, excessive praise is considered unnecessary and potentially harmful to a warrior's continued motivation. Criticism is frequent and blunt. Praise is rare and understated. A wine cup passes around the table. When it reaches you, you're expected to contribute something to the group's benefit, a brief observation, a relevant piece of information, or an insight. This isn't merely social custom, but mandatory participation. Those who cannot contribute meaningfully to the group are not worthy of membership. Mention a technique you observed during afternoon training that might improve the phalanx's left flank coordination. Your observation is acknowledged with brief nods, high praise in this setting. The man next to you, cleaner, adds a suggestion about shield positioning that builds on your comment. This collaborative refinement of military techniques is one of the primary functions of the Sicily, beyond simple nutrition. Cryptic communications. As the meal continues, you notice a member of the Gerousia, Sparta's Council of Elders, enter the building and approach a senior officer dining in another mess group across the room. The elder leans down and whispers something briefly, then departs without waiting for a response. The officer's expression remains unchanged, but he finishes his meal more quickly than usual and leaves shortly after. This type of cryptic communication is common in Spartan society, which values secrecy in military and political matters. Unlike the open democratic debates of the Athenian assembly, Spartan decision-making happens behind closed doors, with information distributed on a need-to-know basis. The Spartans' ability to keep secrets is legendary throughout Greece. Their plans rarely leak to enemies, giving them a significant tactical advantage. Recall how, during the Persian Wars, the Spartan response to a lengthy threat from Philip II of Macedon was simply the single word, if. This masterpiece of laconic communication perfectly encapsulated Spartan character, confident, unflinching, and expressing in a single word what other Greeks might have said in a lengthy oration. The education of youth. As the meal progresses, your attention is drawn to the youngest members of the Syssitia, boys of 16 or 17, who have not yet become full citizens, but are integrated into adult mess groups as part of their education. One such youth sits quietly at the end of your table, speaking only when directly addressed by elders. This integration of youth into adult settings is a central component of Spartan education. Unlike in Athens, where education focuses on a balance of physical, intellectual, and artistic development, Spartan pedagogy is almost exclusively concerned with creating effective warriors and loyal citizens. Boys learn not from formal teachers in schools, but from observation and interaction with adult men. Youth at your table clearly bears the marks of his training. His back shows fresh welts from a recent whipping competition at the altar of Artemis Orthia, where boys demonstrate their endurance by being flogged, sometimes to death, without crying out. His calloused feet attest to years of running barefoot over rocky terrain. His knuckles are split and scabbed from countless fighting exercises. An older member of your mess, Euripon, suddenly addresses the boy. Tell us what you stole today. The question isn't accusatory, but expectant. Spartan boys are deliberately underfed in their training barracks and expected to supplement their meager diet through theft, not as a moral failing, but as training for stealth, cunning, and resource acquisition during military campaigns. However, being caught stealing results in severe punishment, not for the theft itself, but for the failure to execute it skillfully. The boy responds, 3 figs and a piece of cheese from a Periokos merchant's cart. And how did you manage it? Euripon presses. Boy describes his method, creating a distraction with a thrown stone while quickly palming the food items. The men around the table nod approvingly at his ingenuity, offering brief suggestions for improvement. This seemingly bizarre educational practice is taken completely seriously. Spartans believe it develops qualities essential for successful soldiers operating behind enemy lines. The helots roll. Throughout the meal, helot servants move silently between tables, refilling wine cups and removing empty bowls. Their movements are careful, their eyes downcast, their presence barely acknowledged by the Spartiates they serve. These are not household slaves, as might be found in Athens, but state-owned serfs, descendants of populations conquered by Sparta generations ago, and now forming the backbone of the Spartan economy. When Helot, an older man with gray-streaked hair, accidentally bumps against a Spartiate warrior while serving wine, the warrior's reaction is immediate and harsh, a backhand blow that sends the Helot sprawling to the floor, spilling wine across the packed earth. No one at your table or nearby reacts to this incident. Such treatment of helots is commonplace and unremarkable in Spartan society. Helot quickly rights himself, mopping up the spilled wine with a cloth while keeping his eyes lowered. His cheek reddens where the blow landed, but he makes no sound of complaint. To do so would likely result in much worse punishment. Relationship between Spartans and helots is one of institutionalized brutality, a system designed to maintain control over a subjugated population that outnumbers the citizen class by ratio of roughly 7-1. Each year, the Ephors, Sparta's elected officials, formally declare war on the helots, allowing any Spartiate to kill helots without legal consequences if they show signs of rebellion or unusual ability. Recall a story told in hushed tones about an incident years earlier when the Spartans, fearing a helot uprising, announced that the most capable helots could earn their freedom by distinguishing themselves in service to Sparta. 2,000 helots came forward, were crowned with garlands in a public ceremony, and then disappeared. All were secretly executed, a solution to the danger posed by the most ambitious and capable members of the subjugated class. This incident, known as the disappearance of the 2,000, exemplifies the paranoia that underlies Spartan society, a constant fear that their military excellence and strict discipline are the only things preventing a massive slave revolt that would destroy their way of life. Political discussions. As the meal nears its conclusion, conversation turns to political matters. Unlike Athens with its direct democracy, involving thousands of citizens, Sparta's government is a complex mixture of monarchy, oligarchy, and limited democratic elements. 2 hereditary kings serve simultaneously, a unique system in the ancient world, primarily as military leaders and religious figureheads. The real political power lies with the Gerousia, a council of 28 elders plus the 2 kings, and 5 annually elected ephors who oversee the kings themselves. Night, the discussion centers on tensions with Athens. The Peloponnesian War has been raging intermittently for years, a complex conflict that pits Spartan land power against Athenian naval dominance. The fundamental differences between the 2 most powerful Greek city-states extend beyond military capability to encompass diametrically opposed values and social systems. Athens grows weaker by the year, comments Telles, a middle-aged warrior at your table. Their democracy makes them erratic, undisciplined, yet their walls protect them, and their ships control the seas, counters Aristodmus. We can defeat any army they field, but we cannot touch their city without a navy of our own. Discussion continues in this vein, short, direct observations, rather than lengthy debates. Spartan political discourse values brevity and practicality over rhetorical flourish. There are no professional politicians in Sparta, as there are in Athens. All citizens are expected to understand political matters without dedicating themselves exclusively to politics. Listen more than you speak on such topics. As a citizen in your prime, your primary value to Sparta is as a warrior, not a political thinker. The most respected political voices belong to the eldest members of society, those who have proven their worth in battle, and whose age now brings them wisdom rather than combat utility. Crypteia, Sparta's secret police. As the evening progresses, you notice 3 young men enter the dining hall, their appearance causing a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. These are members of the Crypteia, the hidden ones, Sparta's secret police force, composed of young men recently graduated from the Agoge, but not yet full citizens. Selected for their intelligence and physical prowess, these young men operate clandestinely throughout Laconia and Messenia, monitoring the helot population and eliminating potential troublemakers. They move primarily at night, carrying only daggers rather than the traditional hoplite equipment of spear and shield. Any helot caught on the roads after dark is fair game for execution without consequence. The presence of the Crypteia in the Syssitia is unusual. Their operations are typically covert, their methods not openly discussed. Their appearance suggests something significant is happening, perhaps related to the cryptic message delivered earlier by the Gerousia member. 3 young men speak briefly with a senior military officer, then depart as quietly as they arrived. No public announcement follows. No explanation is offered to the general membership. This, too, is is typical of Spartan information control. Those who need to know are informed. Everyone else carries on with their duties without asking unnecessary questions. Women's status in Sparta. As the meal concludes, the conversation turns briefly to family matters, marriages, births, and the selection of suitable matches. This prompts Eurypon to recount a recent encounter with a foreign merchant who expressed shock at the relative freedom of Spartan women. The fool asked me how Spartan men could allow their women such liberty, Eurypon says, with a rare smile. I told him, we alone make women who bring forth men. Table responds with appreciative grunts, another quintessentially laconic response that contains deeper meaning than its brevity might suggest. Spartan women enjoy significantly more freedom and authority than their counterparts in other Greek cities. They receive physical education, can own and manage property, speak openly in public, and exert considerable influence in society, while Athenian women are largely confined to domestic spaces and excluded from public life. Spartan women participate in athletic competitions, manage substantial estates, and are known throughout Greece for their outspokenness. This unusual status stems from Sparta's military focus, with men frequently absent from military training or campaigns. Women necessarily take on greater responsibilities in managing households and land holdings. This different treatment extends to education as well. Spartan girls undergo their own training program, though less rigorous than the agoge, focusing on physical fitness, basic literacy, and music. The underlying philosophy is eugenic. Strong, educated women produce strong, intelligent children who become effective warriors. Recall the famous story of a foreign woman who commented to Gorgo, wife of King Leonidas, Spartan women are the only ones who rule men. Gorgo replied simply, we are the only ones who give birth to men. This response captures the Spartan woman's self-conception, not as subservient to men, but as essential partners in creating and maintaining Sparta's military excellence. Evening entertainment. As the formal meal ends, the evening's simple entertainment begins. Unlike the elaborate symposia of Athens, with their hired musicians, dancing girls, and philosophical discussions, Spartan after-dinner activities remain austere and military-focused. At night, an older warrior leads the group in traditional Spartan war songs, simple, driving compositions with martial lyrics, celebrating famous battles or the virtues of courage and sacrifice. The men sing in unison, creating a powerful acoustic effect in the confined space of the dining hall. These are not complex melodies requiring skilled musicians, but straightforward, memorable tunes designed to build group cohesion and reinforce Spartan values. After the songs, a senior warrior stands to recite portions of the poems of Tyrtaeus, a 7th century Spartan poet whose works are memorized by all citizens. His most famous lines echo through the hall, for it is a fine thing for a brave man to fall and die, fighting in the front line for his native land, but to leave one's city and fertile fields and go begging. That is the most painful experience of all. These poetic recitations serve not as mere entertainment, but as continual reinforcement of core Spartan values, courage, loyalty to the state above all else, and the belief that a noble death is preferable to a life of dishonor. Pederastic relationship. As the evening activities continue, you observe the formalized interactions between adult warriors and adolescent boys that constitute another distinctive aspect of Spartan society. The institutionalized pederastic relationships that form part of the educational system. In Sparta, as throughout much of ancient Greece, relationships between adult men and adolescent boys are formalized and integrated into the educational structure. An adult warrior, the Erasts or lover, takes responsibility for mentoring a youth, the Iraminos or beloved, teaching him military skills, proper behavior, and integrating him into adult male society. Like in Athens, where such relationships often had an openly sexual component, Spartan pederasty is officially described as focusing on mentorship and character development rather than physical relations. However, the reality is more complex, with romantic and sexual elements widely acknowledged as part of these bonds, though discussed with typical Spartan reticence. Notice a young warrior named Lysander sitting beside his teenage mentee, quietly explaining some aspect of shield technique. The boy listens attentively, asking occasional questions that reveal his intelligence and dedication. This relationship will likely last several years, creating bonds that strengthen unit cohesion when both eventually serve together in the phalanx. Such relationships are not merely tolerated, but actively encouraged by the Spartan state as part of the educational system. A boy without an adult mentor might be punished for failing to attract one. Such failure suggests a deficiency in his character or potential. The most promising youths attract the most distinguished warriors as mentors, creating a competitive dynamic that spurs excellence. The ghost of Pausanias. As the evening wears on, the conversation turns to darker matters, specifically the cautionary tale of the regent Pausanias, whose ghost is said to haunt the temple where he met his end. His story serves as a warning about the dangers of departing from Spartan values after exposure to foreign luxury. Pausanias had led the combined Greek forces to victory against the Persians at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE, one of Sparta's greatest military triumphs. However, his subsequent command of the Hellenic League's forces brought him into contact with Persian customs and wealth, which apparently corrupted his Spartan discipline. He began adopting Persian dress, keeping a Persian concubine, and allegedly entered into secret negotiations with Xerxes, offering to bring Sparta under Persian control in exchange for becoming tyrant of all Greece. When these treasonous activities were discovered, Pausanias fled to the temple of Athena for sanctuary. Ephors, unwilling to violate religious custom by forcibly removing him from the temple, instead ordered the entrances sealed. They built a wall around the temple, posted guards, and simply waited. When Pausanias was on the verge of starvation, they briefly removed him from the sanctuary, ensuring he would not pollute the sacred space with his death, then returned him once he had expired. They say his ghost still walks the temple grounds, concludes the warrior telling the tale. Forever hungry, forever trapped. His story, whether historically accurate in all details or not, serves an important social function in Spartan society, reinforcing the dangers of abandoning traditional values and succumbing to foreign influences or personal ambition. Return to barracks. As the evening concludes, you prepare to return not to your simple dwelling, but to the military barracks where all Spartan men under 30 must sleep regardless of marital status. Even after marriage, a Spartan man visits his wife only clandestinely, sneaking away for brief conjugal visits before returning to his barracks before dawn. This system of prolonged male separation from family life is unique to Sparta among Greek city-states. Its purpose is twofold: to maintain primary allegiance to the state rather than the family unit, and to create a social environment where warrior bonds take precedence over all other relationships. Gather your simple belongings, a wooden cup and your knife, both carried to the syssisha and used during the meal. There's no need for a lamp to light your way back to the barracks. Spartans pride themselves on operating effectively in darkness, and the quarter moon provides sufficient illumination for eyes accustomed to night movement. As you step outside, the night air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the slopes of Mount Taygetus. The stars are brilliant in the clear sky. There's no light pollution in this ancient world, allowing the full splendor of the night sky to manifest. Walk in silence alongside several messmates, all heading for the same barracks building. The day has been physically demanding, as all days are in Sparta. But this is the life you've been trained for since age 7, when you were taken from your mother's home and placed in the agoge. Tomorrow will bring similar challenges, more training, more austere meals, more reinforcement of the Spartan ideals of discipline, endurance, and loyalty to the state above all else. But it's the only life you know, the only system you've been taught to value. As you approach the barracks, a long, simple building with sleeping pallets arranged in orderly rows, you reflect briefly on the Spartan way of life. Visitors from other Greek cities often ask, why would anyone choose to live under such harsh conditions? The Spartan answer is simple. The system produces the best warriors in Greece, and for Spartan, there is no higher calling than excellence in battle. Personal comfort, individual expression, and freedom of choice are sacrificed willingly on the altar of military supremacy and societal cohesion. Enter the barracks and find your assigned sleeping pallet no more comfortable than the one in your dwelling. A simple wooden frame with a thin mattress stuffed with reeds. There are no privacy partitions, no personal space in the modern sense. You lie down alongside dozens of other warriors, each man an essential component in Sparta's military machine. Sleep comes quickly to a body exhausted by the day's training. Your last conscious thought before drifting off is of tomorrow's morning exercises, running in full armor up the slopes of Mount Taygetus, a punishing test of endurance that would break warriors from any other Greek city. But not a Spartan. Never a Spartan. Dawn in the barracks. You awaken before sunrise to the harsh sound of a bronze trumpet, the salpinx, its martial call signaling the start of another day of training. There is no gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness in Sparta. One moment you're unconscious, the next you're expected to be fully alert and moving with purpose. Barracks building stirs to life around you as dozens of warriors rise simultaneously from their simple pallets. There's no morning conversation, no complaints about early rising or insufficient sleep. Such weakness would be unthinkable among Spartiates, who pride themselves on enduring discomfort without comment. Outside, the air is cold and damp. The sky still dark, except for a faint lightning along the eastern horizon. Your breath forms visible clouds in the chill morning as you and your fellow warriors quickly assemble in the open ground before the barracks. Secession, mess unit, leaders call out brief commands, organizing men into their training groups for the day. These units mirror combat formations, reinforcing the battlefield hierarchy, even during daily exercises. You take your position in line, standing at attention alongside warriors you've trained with since childhood. Like soldiers in modern armies, you own and maintain your own weapons and armor rather than having them provided by the state. However, your equipment remains stored in the communal armory rather than your private dwelling. Another way that Sparta subordinates individual autonomy to collective military readiness. Today will not be a standard training day. The commander announces that the morning will be dedicated to a special drill, a simulation of battle conditions on rough terrain. This type of exercise is particularly valued in Spartan training because it prepares warriors for the reality that most battles are not fought on perfectly flat, open ground. Morning ablutions. Before training begins, there's time for brief morning ablutions. You walk with others to the nearby stream that serves the barracks. The water is painfully cold, flowing down from the snow-capped peaks of Mount Tegetus. You splash it over your face and upper body without hesitation, suppressing the body's natural response to cold shock. Nearby, a young warrior new to the barracks visibly flinches as the cold water touches his skin. An older Spartiate notices this momentary weakness and responds with a curt verbal reprimand. Control yourself. Water cannot hurt you unless you let it. Young man straightens immediately, forcing his expression to neutral as he continues washing. The lesson is clear. In Sparta, even natural physical reactions must be mastered and controlled. A warrior who cannot govern his response to cold water might flinch at the wrong moment in battle, endangering himself and his comrades. There are no towels. You simply let the water evaporate from your skin as you begin the day's exercises. Wet bodies in the cold morning air create another small discomfort to be ignored, another test of the mind's mastery over physical sensation. Morning exercises. First activity is a running drill in full armor, a standard component of Spartan training, but today conducted over particularly challenging terrain. You don the bronze breastplate, greaves, shin guards, and helmet that constitute a hoplite's defensive equipment. Together, these items weigh approximately 22-27 kilograms, 50-60 pounds, a significant burden to carry while running, especially over uneven ground. Most importantly, you take up your aspies, the large round shield made of wood with a thin bronze facing that is the signature defensive equipment of Greek hoplite warfare. Weighing about 7-10 kilograms, 15-22 pounds, and measuring roughly 90 centimeters, 3 feet in diameter, the aspies is both your primary protection and your greatest encumbrance during movement. Formation begins moving along a predetermined route that leads up into the foothills of Mount Tegetus. The pace is deliberately challenging, not a full sprint, but a steady jog that must be maintained regardless of terrain. Officers run alongside the formation, observing individual performance and occasionally barking terse commands or corrections. The path becomes increasingly difficult as you ascend the slope. Loose rocks, exposed roots, and sudden changes in gradient create potential hazards with every step. A stumble under the weight of full armor could result in serious injury, yet the pace remains unrelenting. Your breathing becomes labored as you continue uphill, muscles burning with the effort of propelling your body and equipment against gravity. Sweat runs freely down your face and neck, some of it stinging your eyes, but you dare not break formation to wipe it away. After approximately 5 kilometers, 3 miles of punishing terrain, the formation reaches a designated plateau where the next phase of training will occur. There's no rest period, no opportunity to catch your breath or recover. In Spartan training, exhaustion is considered the starting point for the most valuable exercises, those that teach warriors to function effectively, even when physically depleted. Phalanx drills. On the plateau, the formation reorganizes into a practice phalanx, the tightly packed infantry formation that serves as the backbone of Greek warfare. You take your assigned position in the second rank, standing so close to your fellow warriors that your shields overlap, creating the continuous defensive wall that gives the phalanx its formidable protection. Drill begins with basic maneuvers, advancing in step, wheeling to the right and left, maintaining proper spacing, while moving across varied terrain. These movements, seemingly simple when performed individually on level ground, become enormously challenging when executed by exhausted men in full armor on a rocky, uneven plateau. The instructors deliberately introduce complications, simulated casualties that must be carried while maintaining formation, sudden changes in direction, and terrain obstacles that require adaptive maneuvers while preserving the integrity of the shield wall. Like other Greek armies that might train once or twice a month, Spartan warriors perform these drills daily, developing a level of unit cohesion and tactical flexibility unmatched in the ancient world. This exceptional training is what allows the Spartan phalanx to execute complex battlefield maneuvers that other armies cannot attempt. After 2 hours of intensive formation drills, the instruction shifts to individual combat techniques within the phalanx context. You practice the primary thrusting motion with your dory, the 2.12 or meter 7-8-foot ash wood spear that is the primary offensive weapon of hoplite warfare, driving the iron spearhead forward from behind the protective wall of shields. These movements are practiced until they become reflexive, capable of being executed perfectly even under extreme stress or exhaustion. A Spartiate must be able to perform these combat techniques without conscious thought, his body responding automatically to the chaos of battle, while his mind remains clear and focused. The fallen warrior, during a particularly demanding segment of the drill, the warrior beside you stumbles on a loose stone and falls heavily to the ground. Such accidents are not uncommon during training on rough terrain, but what follows reveals much about Spartan attitudes toward injury and weakness. Fallen man, a warrior named Telles, who you know from your Sisisha, has clearly injured his ankle. It twists at an awkward angle, and his face betrays momentary pain before he masters his expression. The formation continues its drill around him. There is no immediate pause to attend to the injured man. Telles attempts to stand, but falters as his injured ankle fails to support his weight. An instructor approaches, observing clinically, but offering no assistance. "Can you continue?" he asks simply. "Yes," Telles responds without hesitation, but the ankle is already swelling visibly. Using his spear as a makeshift crutch, Telles forces himself back into formation, putting minimal weight on the injured limb while maintaining his position in the phalanx. No one offers help. To do so would imply that he is incapable of overcoming this challenge himself, an insult to a Spartiate's dignity and resilience. Drill continues for another hour, with Telles visibly suffering, but refusing to acknowledge his pain or request relief. By the time the exercise concludes, his face is pale and drawn, his breathing shallow from the effort of fighting through injury while performing demanding physical tasks. Only after the formal dismissal of the formation do his closest comrades approach to help him down the mountain. Even then, the assistance is minimal. They don't carry him, but simply provide stability as he hobbles along, still bearing his own weight as much as possible. This incident perfectly illustrates the Spartan approach to injury and hardship. Pain is to be endured silently, limitations overcome through will and discipline, and assistance accepted only when absolutely necessary and in ways that preserve the warrior's dignity and self-reliance. Religious observances. As the training unit descends from the mountain, you pass a small shrine to Artemis Orthia, one of the most important deities in Spartan religious practice. Several warriors pause briefly to make quick gestures of respect. Though there is no formal worship at this moment, Spartan religious practices are generally less elaborate than those of Athens, reflecting the overall austerity of their culture. However, religion remains deeply integrated into daily life, with particular emphasis on deities associated with warfare, discipline, and the state. Artemis Orthia's cult is especially significant in Sparta, known for the brutal whipping contest, Diamastigosis, where adolescent boys are flogged at her altar, sometimes to death, as a test of endurance. The goddess's altar is said to become slick with blood during these rituals, which foreign visitors find shocking, but Spartans consider essential to developing warrior fortitude. Other important deities in the Spartan pantheon include Apollo, whose festival, the Carnia, occasionally prevents Spartan armies from deploying even in critical situations. Athena, honored in her martial aspect, and the Dioscuri, Castor, and Pollux, twin gods who serve as patrons of Sparta and models of brotherly loyalty applicable to battlefield brotherhood. Spartan kings serve as priests of Zeus, conducting major sacrifices before military campaigns and other significant state activities. These religious functions are one of the king's primary roles, along with military leadership. As you continue downhill, you observe a group of helots constructing a temporary altar for an upcoming festival. They work under the supervision of a single Spartiate, arranging stones and preparing wood for sacrificial fires. The helots will do all the physical labor for religious celebrations, just as they do for every other aspect of Spartan life, but will not participate fully in the resulting ceremonies, midday meal and rest. Returning to the barracks area by midday, warriors break into their syssha groups for a simple meal. Unlike the evening session, which takes place in a dedicated building, the midday meal is typically consumed outdoors when weather permits. Join your messmates, receiving a portion of maza, barley cake, and a small amount of cheese. The portion is deliberately modest. Spartans believe that mild hunger keeps warriors alert and prevents the laziness that comes from satiety. There's no meat at this meal. Animal protein is generally reserved for the evening session. Helot servant brings a communal pitcher of watered wine, moving silently between groups of dining warriors. The wine is sour and rough by modern standards, but its slight alcohol content makes the questionable water safer to drink by killing some pathogens. During this brief respite, warriors tend to minor equipment maintenance, checking leather straps for wear, polishing shield facings, or inspecting spear shafts for cracks or splinters. Even during rest periods, a Spartiate's mind remains focused on martial readiness. Nearby, you notice Teles having his injured ankle examined by an older warrior with some medical knowledge. Sparta has no professional physicians. Medical care is provided by experienced warriors with practical knowledge of treating combat injuries. Treatment is rudimentary by modern standards. The ankle is manipulated to assess damage, causing visible pain that Teles stoically endures, then bound tightly with leather straps soaked in wine, which serves as a basic antiseptic. There are no pain-relieving medications beyond wine itself, which is offered in a slightly more concentrated form than the diluted version served with meals. The prognosis is delivered bluntly: 3 days of limited training, then return to full duties regardless of pain. Teles nods acceptance of this timeline. To request more recovery time would bring his fortitude into question and potentially damage his standing among his peers. Intellectual training. The afternoon brings a different type of training, one of the rare occasions when Spartiates engage with intellectual rather than purely physical challenges. Today's session focuses on the practical mathematics needed for military purposes, calculating marching distances, estimating enemy numbers, determining supply requirements for for campaigns of various durations, unlike the comprehensive education of Athens, which includes literature, rhetoric, philosophy, and the arts. Spartan intellectual training is narrowly focused on knowledge directly applicable to warfare and state service. Literacy exists at a basic functional level, enough to read and understand military orders or laws, but rarely extended to appreciation of literature for its own sake. The instructor, an older warrior whose combat days are behind him, presents a series of tactical scenarios requiring mathematical solutions. There are no writing materials. All calculations must be performed mentally, and answers delivered orally. This develops the mental discipline needed to make quick calculations under battlefield conditions where writ aids would be impractical. Your Lachos military unit must travel 30 stadia through mountainous terrain carrying 3 days' rations plus full armor. The enemy force, mostly light infantry without significant armor, occupies a position 5 stadia beyond. Calculate your arrival time and combat readiness upon engagement. Work through the problem mentally. A stade is approximately 185 meters, making the total distance around 6.5 kilometers. Heavily armed troops moving through mountains might average 2 to 5 kilometers per hour, suggesting a march time of roughly 3 hours, with combat readiness reduced by approximately 1/3 due to fatigue and the weight of extra rations. You deliver this assessment concisely when called upon. The instructor nods slightly, the Spartan equivalent of high praise, before moving to the next problem. This type of practical education, focused entirely on military utility, reflects Sparta's single-minded dedication to creating effective warriors rather than well-rounded citizens, as Athens attempts to do. Interactions with Periog. Following the tactical training session, you're assigned to accompany a senior officer to inspect a metalworking facility operated by Periog in a settlement near the main Spartan villages. This provides a rare opportunity to observe another distinctive element of Spartan society: the middle status residents, who are neither full citizens nor helots. Periog, literally dwellers around, are free inhabitants of Laconia who handle trade, crafting, and other economic activities forbidden to full Spartiates. While they lack political rights and cannot intermarry with Spartiates, they otherwise live relatively independent lives, managing their own local affairs and practicing trades that support the Spartan military state. Your journey takes you to a busy workshop where several Periog metalsmiths are producing spearheads, sword blades, and other military equipment. The quality of their work is excellent. Spartan weapons are renowned throughout Greece for their functionality and durability, if not for decorative elements that might compromise their practical value. The senior officer inspects finished pieces, occasionally rejecting items that don't meet Sparta's exacting standards. The Periog craftsmen accept this scrutiny without complaint. Their livelihoods depend on satisfying Spartan military requirements. What strikes you during this interaction is the clear hierarchy in which Periog occupy a middle position deferential to Spartiates, but clearly of higher status than helots. When a helot servant accompanying your group enters the workshop, the Periog metalworkers barely acknowledge his existence, mirroring the behavior of Spartiates toward helots. This 3-tiered social system, with Spartiates at the top, Periog in the middle, and helots at the bottom, creates a complex web of dependencies and tension. Spartiates rely on Periog for essential economic functions, while Periog depend on Spartiates for military protection and the stable social order that allows their businesses to function. As you depart, the the senior officer arranges for a shipment of newly forged spearheads to be delivered to the main barracks. No money changes hands. The transaction will be recorded, and compensation provided later in a standardized form. Sparta's economy operates differently from the commercial marketplaces of Athens or Corinth, with greater state involvement and far less emphasis on individual economic achievement. Women's training. On your return journey, you pass an open field where a group of young Spartan women are engaged in their own training exercises. Unlike girls in other Greek cities who receive minimal physical education and are largely confined to domestic spaces, Spartan women undergo a rigorous physical training program intended to produce strong mothers capable of bearing healthy warriors. Young women, wearing short chitons that leave their thighs exposed during exercise, scandalous by the standards of other Greek cities, are practicing javelin throwing under the supervision of an older woman. Their arms are noticeably muscular, their movements confident and precise. Spartan female education includes not only physical training, but also literacy, music, and domestic management skills. The underlying philosophy is eugenic, strong, educated women produce strong, intelligent children who become effective warriors. This approach makes Spartan women unique in the ancient Greek world, with a level of physical conditioning and public presence unimaginable in Athens or Corinth. Female instructor notices your group passing and offers a respectful but confident nod to the senior officer, another indication of the relatively higher status of Spartan women compared to their counterparts elsewhere in Greece. There's no simpering deference or affected modesty, just the acknowledgement of relative position within a shared social system. One particularly skilled young woman lands 3 consecutive javelin throws in the target center, drawing appreciative comments from her peers. Her physical prowess and competitive spirit would be considered inappropriate for women in most other Greek cities. But in Sparta, these qualities are actively cultivated. Recall a famous anecdote about Gorgo, wife of King Leonidas, who was once asked by a woman from Attica, "Why are Spartan women the only ones who can rule men?" Gorgo replied, "Because we are the only ones who give birth to men." This response perfectly encapsulates the Spartan attitude toward female education and status. Their unique freedoms exist to serve the ultimate purpose of producing superior warriors. The cult of youth. As your group continues back toward the main Spartan settlement, you encounter a procession of young boys, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, being led by an older youth toward one of the training grounds. These are new entrants to the Agoj, recently removed from their mothers' homes to begin the brutal education system that will transform them into Spartan warriors. Their heads are freshly shaved, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and determination. Many come from prominent families, but all wear identical simple garments, the first step in breaking down individual identity and building collective loyalty. Senior officer in your group stops to observe the procession, his expression reflecting the seriousness of this transition. For these boys, childhood effectively ends today. They will sleep in communal barracks, receive minimal food, deliberately kept insufficient to encourage theft and resourcefulness, and face increasingly brutal physical challenges as they progress through the system. Many will not survive to adulthood. The Agoj's extreme hardships claim casualties each year, boys who succumb to exposure during winter survival exercises, who die from untreated injuries sustained in fighting competitions, or who simply lack the physical constitution to endure the deliberate malnutrition and constant physical stress. "I remember my first day," the officer comments quietly. a rare moment of reflection from a Spartiate. Thought I would die before the first month ended. Nearly did during the winter trial. This brief glimpse of vulnerability passes quickly as he resumes his professional demeanor. But it reminds you that every Spartiate has endured the same formative crucible, a shared experience of extreme hardship that creates the unbreakable bonds of the Spartan military brotherhood. The agricultural foundation. Approaching the main settlement, you pass extensive agricultural fields where helots labor to produce the food that sustains Sparta. The scene provides a stark visual representation of the economic foundation that makes Sparta's unusual social system possible. Each Spartiate is assigned a kleros, an agricultural land allotment worked by helots that provides the citizen's subsistence without requiring him to engage personally in farming. This economic arrangement is what allows Spartiates to dedicate themselves exclusively to military training and service. Helots in the fields work methodically, harvesting barley under the watchful eye of a single Spartiate overseer. They represent the overwhelming majority of Laconia's population, perhaps 170,000 helots, supporting roughly 8,000 adult male Spartiates. This vastly unequal ratio creates Sparta's fundamental security dilemma, the constant fear of helot rebellion that shapes every aspect of Spartan military culture. The extreme focus on military excellence isn't merely cultural preference, but existential necessity. Without overwhelming martial superiority, the Spartiate minority could not maintain control over the subjugated majority. As you observe the agricultural scene, a wagon passes laden with harvested grain bound for the state storehouses. Sparta's economy is much more centrally managed than the free market systems of other Greek cities, with significant portions of agricultural production allocated by the state rather than sold in open markets. This economic system, like every other aspect of Spartan society, subordinates individual choice and opportunity to collective military readiness. Personal wealth accumulation, while not entirely forbidden, is discouraged through social norms that equate luxury with weakness and ostentation with moral failure. Return to main settlement. Late afternoon finds you back in the main Spartan settlement as the sun begins its descent behind Mount Taygetus. Unlike Athens, with its crowded urban layout, monumental architecture, and bustling market areas, Sparta presents a strikingly different appearance. The settlement consists of distinct villages spread across an open area, with modest buildings of local stone and timber. There are few large public structures beyond those needed for essential state functions, and even these lack the decorative elements that adorn similar buildings in other Greek cities. Past the building where the Gerousia Council of Elders meets to conduct Sparta's political business. Its architecture is functional rather than impressive, reflecting Sparta's general disdain for aesthetic considerations that don't serve practical purposes. Nearby, a group of citizens has gathered for an assembly meeting, one of the limited democratic elements in Sparta's mixed constitution. While all Spartiates theoretically have equal voting rights in the assembly, its powers are restricted compared to Athens' direct democracy, and real authority lies with the Gerousia and the ephors, annually elected officials who oversee the kings themselves. Political discussions appear animated but orderly, with speakers following established protocols. Unlike Athens, where rhetoric is developed as a sophisticated art form, and political debates can become theatrical performances, Spartan political discourse values brevity and directness over oratorical flourish. As the day draws to close, you make your way toward the citizenship building for the evening meal, reflecting on the distinctive society that has shaped you since childhood. To outsiders, Spartan life seems impossibly harsh, lacking the comforts, cultural refinements, and individual freedoms valued elsewhere in the Greek world. Yet to Spartiate, this system represents not deprivation, but pride, the price willingly paid for membership in history's most formidable military brotherhood. The absence of luxury, the constant physical challenges, the subordination of individual desires to collective needs, all are accepted as necessary components of Sparta's unique excellence. The sun casts long shadows across the Laconian plain as you approach the citizenship building. Another day of training and discipline concludes, but the evening brings its own rituals and challenges. The life of a Spartiate continues, austere, demanding, and utterly dedicated to martial excellence above all else. The council of war. Before the evening meal, you're summoned to an unexpected gathering. A messenger appears at the training grounds with orders for selected warriors to report immediately to the royal building, where King Archidamus II is holding a council of war. As a Spartiate in your prime with combat experience, you're among those chosen to attend, an honor that reflects your standing within the military hierarchy. Quickly clean yourself as best you can without the luxury of a proper bath, and make your way to the modest structure that serves as Sparta's royal headquarters. Unlike the ornate palaces of Persian monarchs, or even the more impressive public buildings of Athens, Sparta's royal building is deliberately austere, a physical manifestation of the Spartan constitution that limits royal power and ostentation. Upon arrival, you're directed to a side chamber where approximately 30 warriors have assembled. The atmosphere is tense, voices kept low as speculation circulates about the purpose of this gathering. Sparta is currently engaged in the Peloponnesian War against Athens and its allies, though recent months have seen limited direct conflict. Room falls silent as King Archidamus enters, accompanied by several ephors, the 5 annually elected officials who oversee even the kings, and members of the Gerousia, Council of Elders. Despite being Sparta's hereditary co-king, Archidamus wears the same simple clothing as other Spartiates, distinguished only by subtle indicators of rank that would be nearly imperceptible to foreign observers. His absence of royal regalia is typical of Sparta's approach to leadership. While other monarchs throughout the ancient world surround themselves with luxury and visual symbols of power, Spartan kings are expected to embody the same austerity and discipline required of all citizens. Their authority derives not from dazzling displays of wealth, but from bloodline, military competence, and religious function as priests of Zeus. Archidamus speaks without preamble, his manner direct and concise in the Spartan fashion. We have intelligence that Athens plans to raid coastal settlements in Messenia. Their fleet was spotted near Pylos yesterday. 30 ships, perhaps 2,000 hoplites plus light troops. King continues, outlining a defensive strategy that requires rapid deployment of Spartan forces to potential landing sites along the Messenian coast. Maps are produced, simple but effective representations of coastal topography drawn on leather, and unit assignments are made with minimal discussion. Throughout this briefing, you observe the distinctive characteristics of Spartan military planning: clear objectives, straightforward tactics, minimal debate. Unlike Athenian strategy discussions, which might involve lengthy philosophical arguments about the justice or political implications of various approaches, Spartan planning focuses almost exclusively on practical military considerations. One point, An elderly member of the Gerousia suggests a more aggressive response, not merely defending likely landing sites, but attempting to ambush the Athenian forces as they disembark. This proposal prompts a brief, strategic discussion, but when Archidamus decides against it, the matter is settled immediately without the prolonged deliberation that might occur in Athens. This decisive command structure is one of Sparta's greatest military advantages. While democratic Athens sometimes paralyzed itself with debate or changed strategies midway through campaigns due to shifting political winds, Sparta's more hierarchical system allows for consistent execution of military plans. Briefing concludes with specific orders. Your unit will depart before dawn tomorrow, making a forced march to the southwestern coast of Messenia. The mission is expected to last 8 days, assuming the Athenian threat materializes as anticipated. You're instructed to prepare immediately after the evening meal, gathering supplies and ensuring your equipment is battle-ready. As the meeting disperses, you reflect on how this sudden mobilization exemplifies the Spartan warrior's life: constant readiness, immediate response to threats, and the unquestioned prioritization of military needs over personal convenience or comfort. The festival preparation. Exiting the royal building, you notice unusual activity in the main gathering area of Sparta. Temporary structures are being erected by helots working under the supervision of Spartan officials, preparations for tomorrow's festival of the Carnia, one of Sparta's most important religious observances dedicated to Apollo Carnios. Timing creates a potential conflict. The Carnia is one of the festivals during which Spartan military activity is traditionally suspended. No citizen army is supposed to march during this sacred period, a religious prohibition that has occasionally prevented Spartan forces from responding to critical situations in the past. Most famously, religious observance of the Carnia delayed Sparta's response to the Persian threat at Marathon in 490 BCE, forcing Athens to face the invasion alone. Similarly, during the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BCE, Sparta sent only a small force led by King Leonidas ahead of the main army, which remained behind until the festival concluded. Over here, two ephors engaged in serious discussion about this very issue, whether the current threat justifies an exception to religious custom. Their conversation reveals the tension between Sparta's deeply conservative religious traditions and its pragmatic military necessities. The Carnia begins at tomorrow's dawn, argues the older ephor. Apollo's favor cannot be risked by marching during his sacred days, and if Athens burns our coastal settlements while we placate the god, counters his colleague. Religion must serve Sparta, not cripple her. Debate embodies a fundamental tension in Spartan society: rigid adherence to tradition versus practical adaptation to changing circumstances. Though Sparta is often characterized as unchanging and conservative, its history actually reveals a pragmatic willingness to evolve when survival requires it, albeit at a much slower pace than other Greek states. The matter appears unresolved as the ephors move on, still debating. You make a mental note to prepare for deployment regardless, knowing that final orders might change based on this religious consideration. The evening syssisha, as the sun sets behind Mount Taygetus, you make your way to your syssisha for the evening meal. The atmosphere is different tonight. The impending military deployment and festival have created an unusual buzz of conversation as warriors discuss these developments with uncharacteristic animation. The mess group assembles at the usual location, but you notice several members are absent, presumably attending to duties related to tomorrow's potential deployment or festival preparations. Their absence alters the familiar dynamic of the group, as each member typically plays a specific social role in the mess's internal hierarchy. Food tonight is slightly better than usual. The proximity of a religious festival means that sacrificial meat will be available in greater quantities. You receive your portion of black broth, the notorious Spartan soup made from boiled pig's blood, salt, and vinegar that horrifies visitors from other Greek cities, but which Spartiates consume with stoic indifference to its taste. As the meal progresses, conversation turns to the potential conflict between religious observance and military necessity. Cleaner, an older warrior in your mess with a reputation for traditional piety, argues forcefully for respecting the Karnya prohibition. 3 times in my life, I've seen disaster follow when we ignored the sacred calendar, he declares. The gods do not adjust their expectations to suit our military convenience. Across the table, Antalcidas, a younger, more pragmatic warrior, counters. And did the Athenians consult their religious calendar before planning this raid? They deliberately time their attacks to coincide with our observances, knowing our hands will be tied by tradition. This debate continues with the characteristic Spartan brevity, short, pointed statements, rather than elaborate speeches. Even in disagreement, there's a notable absence of personal attacks or excessive emotion. Spartan discourse values logical clarity and directness over rhetorical flourish or emotional persuasion. The role of experience. During a lull in the conversation, one of the youngest members of the Syssitia, barely out of the agoge at age 20, addresses a question to you directly. You fought at Plataea. What was your first battle like? The question creates a momentary silence. Discussion of personal experiences, especially emotional responses to combat, is uncommon in Spartan society, which generally discourages introspection or public acknowledgement of fear. However, there's a recognized pedagogical value in veterans sharing practical knowledge with inexperienced warriors. Consider your response carefully, aware that your answer serves an educational function for the younger men present. The formation is everything, you reply after a moment. Individual skill matters less than maintaining your position in the line. Watch the man to your right. He's the one most likely to break and run, leaving your unshielded side exposed. This practical advice reflects the realities of hoplite warfare, where the integrity of the phalanx formation is far more important than individual heroics. The right side of each warrior is partially protected by the shield of the man to his right, creating a critical vulnerability if that position is abandoned. You continue with more practical observations. The enemy appears larger and more numerous before engagement than during it. The first clash of shields is the worst moment. After that, training takes over and fear recedes. Young warrior nods, absorbing this information with serious attention. What you've provided isn't merely tactical advice, but a psychological framework for managing the intense stress of combat, presented in the characteristically Spartan way that acknowledges reality without dwelling on emotion. Older veteran adds his own observation. At Thermopylae, we discovered that Persians die just like Greeks when pierced with a spear. Remember that when facing an unknown enemy, this simple statement contains profound psychological insight. The universality of human vulnerability serves as a reminder that even exotic or numerically superior enemies share the same fundamental weaknesses as familiar foes. The Crypteo report. As the meal continues, 3 young men enter the dining hall and approach the senior officer present. You recognize them as members of the Cryptea, Sparta's secret police force, composed of young men who have distinguished themselves in the agoge, but not yet become full citizens. Their arrival creates a subtle tension in the room. The Cryptea's primary function is monitoring and controlling the helot population, often through brutal means, including nocturnal assassinations of particularly strong or potentially rebellious helots. Their activities are rarely discussed openly, maintaining a calculated ambiguity that enhances their effectiveness through fear and uncertainty. 3 young men speak quietly with the officer, who listens with intense concentration before dismissing them with a brief nod. He then addresses the assembled warriors. There's unrest in the northern helot settlements, nothing requiring immediate response, but all hoplites should travel in pairs or groups for the next few days. This announcement, deliberately vague, yet clearly concerning, illustrates Sparta's perpetual security dilemma. With helots outnumbering citizens by perhaps 7 to 1, the threat of rebellion is a constant background concern that occasionally rises to immediate danger. Delicate balance of Spartan society depends on maintaining overwhelming coercive capacity while avoiding provocations that might trigger a mass uprising. The Cryptea serves as both an intelligence network and a targeted elimination system, removing potential helot leaders before they can organize effective resistance. After this sobering announcement, conversation becomes more subdued. The evening continues with traditional Spartan songs, martial lyrics set to simple, driving melodies that reinforce core values of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty to the state. Unlike the sophisticated musical performances that might entertain Athenian dinner guests, Spartan musical culture focuses almost exclusively on martial themes performed with minimal instrumentation. Women's influence. As the formal meal concludes, an unusual visitor arrives at the Sisha building, a Spartan woman in her early 30s, dressed in the simple but distinctive clothing that marks her as a citizen's wife rather than a helot. She requests to speak with Aristodmus, one of the older warriors in your mess group. This direct interaction between a woman and men's quarters would be scandalous in Athens, where respectable women remain largely sequestered from male society outside their immediate family. In Sparta, however, women enjoy substantially greater freedom of movement and speech, a difference that shocks visitors from other Greek cities. Overhear fragments of their conversation, conducted without the lower voices or chaperoning that would be required elsewhere. The woman, apparently Aristodmus' wife, is discussing property matters related to their agricultural land allotment, making decisions that would normally fall to male household heads in other Greek societies. The northern field produced poorly this season, she states matter-of-factly. I've instructed the helots to expand the irrigation channels and apply more manure before the next planting. We'll need to reduce our wine contribution to the Sisisha temporarily. Aristodmus simply nods acceptance of her decision, a tacit acknowledgement of Spartan women's unusual authority in managing household economics. With men absent for military training from age 7 and frequently away on campaigns throughout adulthood, Spartan women necessarily assume responsibility for economic decisions that would be male prerogatives elsewhere. This economic authority contributes to Spartan women's distinctive status. By some estimates, they control approximately 40% of Laconian land through inheritance and dowry systems that differ significantly from those of other Greek states. This economic power translates to greater social influence, with Spartan women known throughout Greece for their outspokenness and relative independence. As the woman departs, having concluded her business without social awkwardness or excessive deference, you notice the reaction of a visiting periodicos merchant who has been delivering supplies to the Sisisha. His barely concealed shock at this interaction reveals how dramatically Spartan gender relations differ from Greek norms, another aspect of Sparta's distinctive social system that supports its military focus at the cost of conformity with wider Hellenic culture. The Mothex, during the less formal period following the main meal, you observe a young warrior sitting slightly apart from the main group. Though he wears the standard Spartan clothing and participates in all military training, subtle social cues mark him as somewhat separate from full Spartiates. This is Dorius, a Mothex, the child of a Spartiate father and a Helot mother, occupying an unusual middle status in Sparta's otherwise rigid social hierarchy. Mothex represent a pragmatic adaptation to Sparta's demographic challenges. With the full Spartiate population declining due to various factors, casualties in constant warfare, increasing economic inequality that prevents some citizens from meeting their Sisisha obligations, and a birth rate insufficient to maintain numbers, the Mothex provide a supplementary source of military manpower. Unlike full Spartiates, Mothex do not receive land allotments, but must be financially sponsored through the Agoge education system by Spartiate families or patrons. Upon completing this training, they can serve in the military, but typically without the full political rights of citizens. However, exceptional service can occasionally result in a Mothex receiving citizenship, one of the few paths to Spartiate status for those not born to it. Notice that while Dorius is included in military discussions and training references, he remains peripheral to conversations about political matters or property issues. His hybrid status creates a complex identity, trained as a Spartiate warrior, but carrying the permanent social marker of Helot ancestry. This practical compromise between Sparta's rigid social ideology and its pressing military needs illustrates a recurring pattern in Spartan history. When demographic or military realities conflict with traditional social structures, pragmatic adaptations are reluctantly implemented, while the fiction of unchanging tradition is carefully maintained. Night exercises. As evening deepens into night, you prepare for an unexpected addition to the day's training, a night navigation exercise announced by the commanding officer. Despite the full day of physical exertion already completed, no one shows hesitation or requests exemption from this additional challenge. In Sparta, training never truly ends. It merely changes form to develop different aspects of warrior capability. A group of 15 warriors is provided with minimal instructions. Navigate to a specific location in the foothills, approximately 10 kilometers away. Retrieve a bronze token left there by an advance party, and return before dawn. No torches or lamps are permitted. The exercise must be completed using only natural moonlight and starlight for illumination. This type of night training serves multiple military purposes. It develops the ability to move silently and effectively in darkness, a valuable skill for ambushes or surprise attacks. It reinforces navigational abilities using stars and landscape features rather than marked paths. Most importantly, it builds confidence in operating under adverse conditions where other armies might be effectively paralyzed. Group departs from the main settlement, moving in single file with carefully measured steps to minimize noise. The quarter moon provides minimal illumination, forcing you to rely more on feel than sight when traversing difficult terrain. Communication occurs through hand signals and occasional whispered words, a specialized vocabulary of brief commands developed specifically for for night operations. Landscape transforms in darkness, becoming both more treacherous and more concealing. Familiar terrain features appear alien when seen only as silhouettes against the night sky. Spatial awareness, typically dominated by visual input during daylight, now incorporates more auditory and tactile information. The sound of the Eurotas River providing orientation. The feel of slope changes underfoot, indicating position on hillsides. Sensory adaptation represents another aspect of Spartan military excellence, training that develops capabilities beyond those cultivated by standard daytime exercises. While other Greek armies might be effectively blind at night, Spartan forces maintain operational capacity around the clock, providing a significant tactical advantage in extended campaigns. The encounter, approximately halfway to your destination, your group freezes at a signal from the lead scout. Something is moving in the darkness ahead, multiple figures advancing along the same path your group is following. Silent hand signals communicate the essential information. At least 6 individuals, moving with purpose rather than the casual pace of travelers, not using light sources. In the darkness, it's impossible to identify whether these are fellow Spartiates on a similar exercise, Perioke traveling for legitimate reasons, or helots moving illicitly after curfew. The commanding officer signals for ambush positions, a precautionary measure that allows for either peaceful identification or immediate tactical advantage if the encounter proves hostile. Your group melts into the surrounding vegetation with practiced efficiency, becoming nearly invisible despite the open terrain. Years of training in stealth movement allow Spartan warriors to achieve concealment that would be impossible for conventionally trained soldiers. The approaching figures continue forward, unaware of your presence. As they draw closer, their whispered conversation becomes audible, the distinctive Messenian dialect of helots, rather than the Doric Greek of Spartiates. This immediately elevates the situation from routine to potentially serious. Helots are forbidden from traveling armed or gathering in groups after dark without specific authorization. Your commander signals for continued observation rather than immediate intervention. This balanced response reflects Spartan tactical discipline, gathering complete intelligence before committing to action, even when confronting apparent violations of security protocols. As the helot group passes your position, their conversation becomes more clearly audible, revealing their purpose. They're traveling to a remote location for a clandestine religious ceremony honoring Messenian cultural traditions that predate Spartan conquest. They carry no weapons beyond small agricultural knives, and their manner suggests ritual purpose rather than rebellious intent. Commander allows them to pass unmolested, though he clearly memorizes distinguishing features for potential future identification. This measured response demonstrates the nuanced reality of Spartan control systems, while the official policy mandates harsh suppression of any unauthorized helot activity. Practical implementation often involves careful judgment about which violations truly threaten state security. After the helot group disappears into the darkness, your exercise continues. The encounter will certainly be reported upon return, but the lack of immediate intervention represents a pragmatic assessment that religious gatherings, while technically forbidden, pose less immediate danger than armed assemblies or organized resistance activities. The sacred mountain, your night journey takes you deeper into the foothills of Mount Tegetus, the imposing mountain range that dominates the geography of Laconia and features prominently in Spartan religious and cultural identity. Even in darkness, its massive presence can be felt more than seen. a looming absence of stars in one portion of the night sky. Hygitus holds profound significance in Spartan culture beyond its practical functions as a natural fortress wall and the source of essential resources like timber and hunting grounds. According to tradition, it is here that weak or deformed Spartan infants are exposed, left to die of exposure, as part of the eugenic practices that ensure only the physically promising survive to enter the Agoj training system. Whether this practice is as systematic as portrayed in some accounts remains debated by historians. But the mountain certainly holds associations with Sparta's uncompromising approach to physical fitness and military capacity. As you navigate its lower slopes, you're traversing a landscape freighted with cultural meaning, a physical embodiment of Sparta's most severe customs. The specific location you seek is a small shrine near a distinctive rock formation, not one of Sparta's major religious sites, but a minor sacred space used periodically for specific training exercises like tonight's. Upon arrival, your group locates the bronze tokens left by the advance party, each warrior taking one as proof of successful navigation. Contrary to common depictions of Sparta as rigidly militant and devoid of religious sensitivity, you pause briefly at the shrine to make a simple offering, a small libation of water poured from a canteen. This basic act of piety reflects the deep integration of religious observance into all aspects of Spartan life, including military training. Even night exercises incorporate acknowledgement of divine powers believed to oversee human activities. With tokens secured and religious obligations observed, your group begins the return journey. The physical challenge is significant, approximately 20 kilometers of total distance covered over difficult terrain in darkness after a full day of standard training. This level of endurance exceeds what most other Greek armies would consider reasonable. But for Spartans, it represents the expected baseline of military capability. Return to barracks. Return to the main settlement shortly before dawn, completing the night exercise successfully despite physical exhaustion. The sky has begun to lighten along the eastern horizon, though full daylight remains an hour away. Your group reports to the commanding officer, presenting the bronze tokens as evidence of mission completion. The officer receives this proof without comment or praise. Successful completion is the expected standard, not an achievement deserving special recognition. The only acknowledgement is a brief statement. Assembly delayed 2 hours. Rest until then. This terse announcement represents significant accommodation by Spartan standards, a rare acknowledgement that even the most disciplined warriors require some recovery period after extended exertion. You return to the barracks, where most men immediately collapse onto their sleeping pallets, using the brief reprieve to restore energy for the day ahead. As you lie on your simple pallet, muscles aching from the cumulative strain of the day's activities, you reflect on the distinctive society that has shaped your existence. By the standards of Athens or any other Greek city, the Spartan lifestyle represents extraordinary hardship, constant physical strain, minimal comfort, subordination of individual desire to collective need, and unending vigilance against both external enemies and internal helot rebellion. And within the Spartan cultural framework, this existence carries profound meaning and satisfaction. The hardships you endure are not meaningless suffering, but necessary components of excellence, the price willingly paid for membership in history's most formidable military brotherhood. The austerity that visitors find shocking is, to Spartiate, a source of pride, visible proof of the discipline that sets Sparta apart from what they consider the softness and decadence of other Greek states. As sleep begins to claim your exhausted body, your final conscious thought acknowledges this fundamental paradox of Spartan existence. A life that would appear intolerably harsh by external standards provides its participants with a deep sense of purpose and belonging unavailable in more comfortable societies. The system's brutality and its meaning are inseparable. Each gives the other its distinctive character in the unique social experiment that is classical Sparta. Legacy of Sparta. As night falls over the temporary camp and warriors prepare for early departure the next morning, conversations around small cooking fires turn to the conflict with Athens and its potential resolution. Despite Sparta's formidable military capabilities, the war has dragged on for years without decisive conclusion, illustrating the resilience of both systems when operating in their preferred domains. What none of these warriors can know is that Sparta will eventually prevail in this Peloponnesian War, forcing Athens to surrender in 404 BCE after the destruction of its fleet at Aegispotami. Yet this victory will ultimately prove Pyrrhic. The extended conflict will accelerate social changes already undermining Sparta's traditional system, including declining citizen numbers, increasing wealth inequality, and growing helot restiveness. Within 3 decades of defeating Athens, Sparta's military dominance will end abruptly at the Battle of Leuctra, 371 BCE, where innovative Theban tactics developed by Epaminondas, the same officer encountered earlier at the Carnia, will shatter the myth of Spartan invincibility. The subsequent liberation of Messenia will deprive Sparta of its helot workforce, collapsing the economic foundation that supported its unique military system. By the Hellenistic period, Sparta will become something of a living museum, maintaining watered-down versions of traditional practices for tourists interested in its famous past, while exercising little real power in a world dominated by Macedonian successor kingdoms. Roman visitors will later marvel at these preserved customs, contributing to Sparta's enduring legend, even as its practical influence fades completely. Its future remains invisible to you and your fellow warriors as you prepare for the next day's march. From your perspective, Sparta represents the pinnacle of Greek military achievement, a social system perfectly designed to produce superior warriors who embody the virtues of courage, discipline, and loyalty to the state above all personal considerations. As you settle onto the hard ground for a few hours of sleep before dawn departure, your mind returns to the fundamental truth that defines Spartan existence. The entire social system, from eugenics at birth to tightly controlled funeral practices, serves the single purpose of creating and maintaining superior military capability. Every hardship, every unusual custom, every sacrifice of individual preference to collective need contributes to this singular goal. Whether this single-minded focus represents admirable dedication or troubling extremism remains a question that has fascinated observers from ancient times to the present day. The Spartan experiment in radical militarization produced extraordinary results within its narrow domain of infantry excellence, while deliberately sacrificing achievements in domains that other societies value: artistic creation, intellectual innovation, economic development, and individual fulfillment. Your eyes close on these reflections, your body accustomed to finding rest under adverse conditions. Tomorrow brings potential combat against Athenian landing forces, another opportunity to demonstrate the effectiveness of the system that has shaped every aspect of your existence since birth. Whether that system represents an admirable ideal or a cautionary example depends entirely on which values one prioritizes. A question as relevant to modern societies as it was in the classical Greek world that Sparta both defended and defined itself against.